That.
All right.
All right.
This little light of mine.
Here we go. Okay, here we go.
Hello there, beings of the universe,
Hello.
far and wide across this continent and beyond. We're happy to have you here on planet Earth, learning and mending. Today, on this spring day of April, great to see everyone here in the learning and mending zone. I've got a really special embroidery of the week that I would like to share from a very special little bee. I love the wings. Check out the detail on the wings. This is from one of our special embroidery kits that you are welcome to have one sent to you in the mail free of charge. We would love to support your embroidering intuition and your embroidering desire. This one was left unsigned by the artist, which I also think is cool. Sometimes you want to put your name on your work, and other times you don't. So I support whoever made this of a native bee. And just a reminder, if you could mute yourself. There we go. If you could keep yourself muted if you're not reading or sharing in the discussion, that's always helpful for us trying to keep our wits about us. So what can I tell you? My name's Emily. I'm here in Echo Park. I work with Metabolic Studio, and I'm standing in for our host, normal host, Jen Curtis today. And what we're going to do now is just go around and share a bit about where we're calling in from, our preferred pronouns, and what we're working on tonight. And so I'm Emily in Echo Park, Los Angeles, she, her pronouns, and I'll just be helping out with a few different aspects of the call tonight, but I'm excited to possibly begin my Bison embroidery. I don't usually get to do my embroidery, but tonight I think I'm gonna have some time, and I have this really beautiful gradient thread. So I've said enough. Let me go ahead and pass it on to Linda, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Great. It's so nice to be back with you guys. I have not been able to be here for like over months. But anyway, I'm Linda. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area in Los Altos, and I go by she, her pronouns. And I will pass this along to Olan.
Hello. I am Olan. I am in Hollywood-ish, and I use she, her pronouns. And this is the embroidery in progress, coming in and out of this dimension. I'm working multidimensionally on this embroidery. And I will pass it along to Stefano.
Stephanie?
Oh,
Or is there a Stefano?
I said Stefano, but
Okay.
well,
Stephanie is welcome to.
I'll pass it to Stephanie, and this is Stefano, and happy to be here as always, and looking forward to this second episode of the Bison Learning and Mending. And yeah, I won't be embroidering, but I'll be joining happily. And I'll pass it on to Stephanie.
Thanks, Stefano. I'm Stephanie. I've been working on the Bison. Trying to-
Wow.
That looks great. Hold that up there. I want to pin it. It looks amazing. Wow, it's beautiful.
Thanks. It's actually, I like what you've got behind you, Emily. I'm looking at that bright green, and I ordered a bunch of different colors. So I'm
Lovely.
looking at your inspiration. Stephanie, she her in Los Angeles. And I pass it to Kelly Sky.
All right. Hi, I'm Kelly Sky. I am calling in from the Seattle area near the Salish Sea, the territory of the Duwamish and the coastal Salish people. Salish Sea is, usually the Puget Sound, but I like to call it the Salish Sea. And tonight I am going to be, she, her, and they. I like the multiples. Tonight I'm going to be sharing the screen and hosting, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to start my Bison embroidery, but I got it in the mail this week, so next week I'm going to come and there's going to be some stitches in it so I can share with you guys. And I will pass it to Vicky.
Hi there. I'm Vicky. I'm in Santa Monica. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to just listen to the Bison and beautiful embroideries. Thank you. And Hannah, have you gone?
Hi, I'm Hannah. In the Eagle Rock, Glendale kind of area. So last time when people were reading, I don't really have pronouns. I don't really actually have a preference what pronouns people use because I'm all of those things. So yeah, last time I was using this like a prayerful stitching, and so I'm using up stuff from my sewing basket that I just can't be bothered to look at anymore. Oh, hang on, I've done background blur. Anyway, so if you can see, I was inspired by the fact that,
Beautiful.
Bison is synonymous or whatever with the thunder beings or, rain. And then one of the readings was talking about the water under the ground, the pothole water. And then as I was doing this lightning, which you can't see properly, but it doesn't matter about what it looks like. But then there was basically a thunderstorm and it flooded in the room. It flooded in the place where I'm staying. I don't really know this house because I'm not like I haven't stayed here for very long. But yeah, well, this water came in, and
Wow.
so yeah, pray with your stitching. It's cool. It makes more water come. Okay, cool.
Wonderful. Thank you. Do you want to pass it to someone?
Sorry, who hasn't gone? Jason, did you go? Jason Clarkson or Kaz?
Hi.
Okay.
Kaz
Sorry.
here. That worked out well. Thank you. She, her pronouns with you from the Mojave Desert. I am actually working on something kind of funny. Today, I'm making a shield for a cell phone for a project that I'm hosting this weekend in Llano del Rio. So let's see. Looking forward to getting back to my embroidery though. And I will pass it to Alex.
Hello. Hi, I'm Alex. I just got on, but hello to everyone. I go by he, him, and I'm happy to be with everybody tonight. And I'm just going to be maybe adding some extra little things to my finished little work here. There you go.
Nice.
Ooh.
Fun. It was really, I didn't think I'd finish, so I'm proud of myself. I got it done. So on to the next one.
I saw just one quick interjection, Alex. I saw your finished mallow at the studio today.
Oh, good.
And it was very beautiful. I hadn't seen it before, so good job on that.
Thanks. Is there anyone else that has it gone? If not, I can pass it back to Emily.
Sure. How about, I want to hear from some more folks that we don't know very well, if possible. So let me ask, Jimena, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, you said my name perfectly. My pronouns are she, her, ella in Spanish. I'm currently in Arcata, Humboldt for school. But I'm actually from Montecito Heights, Highland Park area. Yeah, and I'm not working on any embroidery right now. I'm here for the conversation, but I'm feeling inspired already to take on a project.
Wonderful. Glad to have you with us. Thanks for
Thank you.
tuning in. And let's see. Ashley, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm joining from beautiful Alhambra, California, and I'm here to say hi to everybody and listen in. And I'm I'm starting to work on some weaving from some natural materials that I gathered that were plentiful, some pine needles and stuff like that.
Lovely.
Oh, and my pronouns are she, her.
Lovely. Thank you for joining. And let's have one more introduction from our friend Andrea, if possible.
Hello, Andrea or Drea calling in from Los Angeles. And I'm starting the buffalo tonight. I just put the first few stitches. It's a lot more intimidating than the last one. Yeah, that's all. Should I pass it or would you like it back?
I'll take it back. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Let's see. I think we can move into our kind of series description here, so we all have a kind of bearing on where we are and where we've been and where we're going and where we might like to go next time. So let me just share with you that information. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Learning and Mending. Since the pandemic began, Metabolic Studio has moved our weekly open studio practice to Zoom. In this 8th series of Learning and Mending, Bison and Range, we will look at the grassland ecozone that spans more than 180 million acres, stretching across the center of the North American continent, from its northern tip to the wetlands that flow into the oceans, and how this vast network of biologically diverse landscapes has been radically re-terraformed by the ideologies of manifest destiny, extractivism, capitalism, monocultural farming, and the colonization of the commons of soil, water, and seed. To honor the bison, we have a new embroidery designed by Michel Breard, and we are happy to add it to our collection. If you would like one of these or one of the other patterns that we have to offer, please let us know at info@metabolicstudio.org. In this series, we explore the story of this landscape, commonly referred to as the Great Plains, and the symbiotic relationship the bison herds shared with this ecosystem over millennia before being nearly exterminated by European settlers. The First Nations of this continent are still deeply connected with the epistemological interdependent web of life, and in this series, we will learn about the contemporary movement led by Indigenous people and their allies to bring the bison back to their range, while confronting systemic colonialism in its past and present forms. In this time of spring renewal, we come together to celebrate the deep knowledge of the herd, the biodiverse prairies of our continent, Indigenous wisdom and peoplehood, and continue to explore the systemic changes that are urgently needed for a more just and ecologically sane future. Olan Jones, Director of Overtone Industries, will conduct our participatory Zoom choir with sound artist Douglas Lee. They will direct us in a virtual choir through the silo we work with on the western boundary of the Great Basin each week during this series. More will be revealed. That's going to happen at the end of our reading and discussion tonight. And additionally, this 6-week series is curated and led by Kelly Skye, an ecologist, artist, and PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz. For the reading, we will share our screen displaying this week's reading. So feel free to jump in and read aloud from the text as you feel inspired, as we welcome one and all to both listen and give voice to the unique texts that we share each week. And with that, hopefully that all gives us a sense of where we are and what we're doing and what we hope to accomplish. And I can pass it off to my colleague and friend, Kelly Sky.
Thank you, buddy. Good job. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited to have you here and continue this journey. Tonight, we are going to continue with our reading of Winona LaDuke's All Our Relations, Native Struggles for Land and Life. And we're also going to have one more reading from Prairie and Natural History by Candace Savage, because she has this incredible part of her book that I couldn't resist weaving in about the wetlands and these micro sanctuaries that still exist across the Great Plains. And I just as a little intro, tonight is a really interesting combination of readings, because on the one hand, we are going to read about the very real large-scale re-terraforming of the Great Plains that began with the decimation of the wild buffalo herds and continued as industrial agriculture set in. And it has led to an ecological catastrophe. There's no doubt about it. And so we're going to read about that part. But we're also going to hear about these wetland playas, as they're called, and in some places they're called potholes, which are these areas that are these kind of micro sanctuaries across the Great Plains that have this abundant life and diversity going on. And so it's I don't know, it was interesting for me, and a surprising juxtaposition of readings in my own experience of it, putting it together. And I'm not even totally sure what to make of it, but I do wonder what we can understand from this resilience, this living resilience that is still going on the plains, despite this incredible changes that have happened. And also just thinking through the characteristics of the bison and a reintegration of whole systems thinking and how into our relations, and how that might actually help us lead to helping rebound kind of this diverse life that wants to happen on the plains and is still there in these pockets. So anyway, it's a really interesting combination. I'll leave it at that, with the intention of hopefully picking up that discussion thread at the end. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention briefly is that we will be hearing about a couple of really important Indigenous activists again today, like Rosalie Little Thunder. And I just wanted to entice you guys to come back, because next week we're going to actually read from writings of Rosalie and learn more about her work. So I just wanted to let you know that although we didn't get into it tonight, we will be circling back around and learning about her and many other Indigenous activists who are fighting for the bison and the health of the whole across the plains. And then the last thing I'll say, I know I said this is the last, but is that tonight I had this feeling last week that, when we learn about the bison and the buffalo herds just through words, there was something missing sensorially. So I just wanted to share with you guys, to start us and to prime us, a 3-minute video that's just a video of the bison on the plains. And that way we can see how they move and how they interact, and start to actually learn from the bison themselves, how they breathe. So I just wanted to start with that little primer tonight, and then we'll dive into the readings and have our discussion afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and be the sharer of the screen and start our intro here. Please someone tell me if you can't hear or see anything. Okay, so that was just to see them. I chose that specifically because there was no voiceover. You just heard the wind and saw the buffalo. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll start our readings. Does that look okay? I'm new to share screen. Emily, give me a thumbs up. See my screen? Okay.
Bison just. He's very angry. Yeah, he is. It's because there's two that came in.
There you go. If you hide the thumbnail, maybe it'll make the text just a little bit bigger, Kelly. Might be helpful. Yeah.
Buffalo dance songs. Buffalo were not only a life-giving material resource to the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains. They were also a spiritual presence. These songs were recorded around 1920 by a Pawnee man named Wisita Blaine. Both had been passed down from previous generations and were inspired by dreams. The waves of dust in the first song seemed at first to hide a crowd of people, but the figures were soon revealed to be a herd of buffalo. The waves of dust. Listen, he said. There, the buffalo are coming in a great herd. These are his sayings. There, the buffalo are coming in a great herd. The waves of dust roll downward. There, the buffalo are coming in a great herd. They mark the place of the buffalo wallow. The buffalo are coming. Listen, he said. Yonder, the buffalo are coming. These are his sayings yonder. The buffalo are coming. They walk, they stand, they are coming. Yonder, the buffalo are coming. And I'm not sure that we mentioned this, but usually we just take turns reading. Whoever wants to read, just jump in and read till you don't want to read anymore, and then someone else will pick up.
The buffalo are prairie makers, for it was the white buffalo cow woman who in the beginning brought to us our most sacred pipe, and from that time we have been related with the four-leggeds and all that moves. Tatanka the buffalo is the closest four-legged relative that we have, and they live as a people as we do. Black Elk, Oglala Gila, 1863 to 1950. Buffalo determine landscapes by their sheer numbers, weight, and behavior. They cultivated the prairie, which is the single largest ecosystem in North America. The destruction of the herd set in motion the ongoing ecological and now economic crisis that afflicts the Great Plains. Think of it this way. In 1850, 50 million buffalo ranged the prairie system and left it in excellent shape. 100% of all plant and animal species were present without the benefit of fences, federal subsidies, elaborate irrigation systems, or powerful pesticides. Today, a century and a half later, the environment is quite different. Industrialized agriculture has transformed land, life, and water. 45.5 million cattle live in this same ecosystem now, but they lack the adaptability of buffalo. Industrial agriculture determines the entire ecosystem from feed crop monoculture to feedlots, from underpriced public grazing permits, a holdover from reservation leases, to drawdown of the aquifers, agricultural runoff, and soil erosion. Much of this is for cows. The prairies today are teeming with pumps, irrigation systems, combines, and chemical additives. Much of the original ecosystem has been destroyed. The Great Plains have been stripped of their biodiversity. This biome that covers more area than any other in North America has suffered a massive loss of life. As Grassland's author Richard Manning writes, if one can find an ungrazed stretch of native high plains, one can identify as many as 250 species of plants inhabiting a single site. On a site that has been grazed by domesticated livestock, that count would drop to about 4. A wheat farmer drops the count to 1 species. On grassland, soil erosion is virtually non-existent. On wheatland, it is constant. Manning quotes the Pawnee. Grass, no good, turned over. Simple and to the point.
According to Jeremy Rifkin, Cattle are a primary cause of much of the ecological destruction of the western half of the United States. Let loose on public lands, each animal eats its way through 900 pounds of vegetation every month. They strip the rangeland of its forage of grass and herbage and browse on shrubs, trees, cactus, and tree bark. Their powerful cloven hooves trample and compact plant and soil with the pressure of 24 pounds per square inch. The soil compaction reduces the air space between soil particles, reducing the amount of water that can be absorbed. The soil is less able to hold the water from the spring melting of snow and is more prone to erosion from the flash floods that run along the surface. Over 270 million acres of federal rangeland are presently released to cattlemen, often at a highly subsidized rate. Given the subsidy, it is unclear who will pay the long-term cost of the loss of biodiversity in those areas, a direct result of overgrazing. Cattle and other domestic livestock destroy ecosystems and limit the ecosystem's ability to support wild species, from native birds to large mammals such as elk, bighorn sheep, pronghorn, and antelope. One of the reasons is the sheer amount of land and resources that are allocated for livestock. In the Bumps, Oregon district of the Bureau of Land Management, about 252 million pounds of herbage were allotted to livestock, leaving fewer than 8 million pounds for wildlife. Not surprisingly, there are a few indigenous species left in the region. A 1990 study, for instance, found that only 20% of the Great Plains remain sufficiently unaltered to be potentially capable of ever supporting natural plant communities. No other system has suffered such a massive loss of life. Then there is the water needed for agriculture and for the cities located in places with little water, which require huge diversion projects. The United States and Canada, on an almost corresponding scale, has created the world's largest water distribution system ever. The Bureau of Reclamation has irrigated 9.1 million acres and constructed 332 reservoirs, 345 diversion dams, 14,490 miles of canals, 34,990 miles of laterals, 930 miles of pipelines, 218 miles of tunnels, 15,530 miles of drains, 147 pumping plants, and 49 power plants in the United States, much of it in the arid West.
Under the surface of the land, the water is also being pillaged. The Ogallala Aquifer is a cache of ancient fresh water that underlies most of the Great Plains region. The crush of industrialized agriculture in the 1970s is sucking the reservoir dry. Between 1959 and 1977, for instance, Nebraska farmers increased the amount of acreage under irrigation by 7-fold to 7 million acres. By 1975, farmers in the region pumped more than 27 billion gallons a day from the Ogallala Aquifer. Drawdown rates today continue to drop the aquifer level by 4 feet per year. The recharge of this aquifer is estimated to be 1/2 inch a year. Today, 20% of nationally irrigated cropland is serviced by the Ogallala, but hydrologists suggest it will be depleted within 30 years. I'm wondering when this was written. It is also not surprising that we are losing the topsoil in the region. This country has lost nearly 1/3 of its prime topsoil. 200 years ago, most of the prairie regions had over 21 inches of topsoil. Today, in some regions, less than 6 inches remain. The United Nations discusses this phenomenon internationally in terms of desertification. Desertification or desertification is attributed largely to overcultivation of land, overgrazing of livestock, deforestation, and improper irrigation techniques. All of this is occurring on the Great Plains, and much of it is underwritten by American taxpayers. Collectively, diversion projects, below market price grazing fees on public lands, salvage logging and subsidies to industrialized agriculture continue to dominate the policies of the region. Pass.
The ecological crisis of the region, however, is not a result of one decision, such as that to graze cattle. Many would argue that the ecological future of the Great Plains is intertwined with the psychological and spiritual relationship the prairies and the people of the prairies have with the buffalo, and with American culture and mythology. Cattle cultures take over the prairie, and the subsequent destruction of the buffalo herds is a multifaceted mistake, and one whose significance is becoming increasingly apparent. At its foundation, many would say, is a spiritual mistake. Killing without reverence. When you take a buffalo, there is a Lakota ceremony, the buffalo kill ceremony. In that ceremony, the individual offers prayers and talks to the spirit of the animal. Then and only then will the buffalo surrender itself. That is, when you kill the buffalo. That was not done for the 50 million buffalo decimated by US agriculture and buffalo hunters, nor for the present Yellowstone herd, except that is for those commemorated in recent times by people like Rosalie Little Thunder, Virgil Killstrait, and others. To kill incorrectly, many would say, affects and disrupts all life.
So, just to finish that reading, I just wanted to take a moment, a breath pause before we move into the next.
Water of life. Here is a land where life is written in water. Water is the medium of life, so it is not surprising that aquatic habitats, including oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, and marshes, are among the richest and most productive environments on Earth. But it may be surprising to discover that this generalization holds true for the landlocked Great Plains, a region that we typically associate with drought, dust storms, and water shortage. On a planet where 2/3 of the surface is covered by water, the wide expanse of the prairies is a sea of dry land, broken here and there by small islands of aquatic habitat. Broadly speaking, the area covered by water is greatest in the eastern tall grass country and diminishes toward the west, following the logic of declining precipitation. Thus, in parts of central Manitoba, the inrush of moisture-bearing air from both west and south produces lush meadows and extensive reedy marshes that occupy as much as 25% of the landscape. But on the prairies of Alberta, where the mountains block out the rain, wet meadows and marshes cover a mere 5% of the range. Similarly, if you cross the border into the States and head for the southern plains, the area of surface water declines incrementally. In Nebraska and Texas, for example, where the summer sun has the power to suck whole rivers out of their beds, the coverage of water declines to a fraction of a percent. Yet, though limited in physical area, the aquatic habitats of the prairies are biologically immense, capable under ideal conditions of producing more life in less space than almost any other environment on the planet. That's a nice picture. Pass.
For the purposes of discussion, it is useful to divide the aquatic habitats of the Great Plains into two categories: wetlands or marshes, and rivers and lakes. Scientifically speaking, the term wetland refers to any shallow depression, less than 2 yards or meters deep, that is capable of holding water for long enough to permit the growth of sedges, cattails, and other non-woody semi-aquatic vegetation. In other words, it is basically a puddle filled with water-loving plants. Yet this deceptively simple definition leaves room for almost infinite variability in water depth, temperature, permanence, chemistry, soil type, fertility, life history, and just plain chance. So every prairie wetland is, to some extent, a unique habitat that supports a unique community of organisms. Millions of these mostly small, self-contained marshes are dotted across the Great Plains, providing resource-rich refuges for a remarkable diversity and number of insects, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and most spectacularly, birds. For example, the Llano Estacado, or Staked Plains region, south of Amarillo, Texas, is so emphatically dry and flat that it cannot sustain the flow of a permanent river. Once described as the Great Sahara of North America, the region is now essentially a wall-to-wall expanse of cotton fields under irrigation. Yet this dreary prospect is redeemed by the presence of around 20,000 shallow, saucer-shaped depressions known as playas or playa lakes that serve as havens for wildlife. An additional roughly 6,000 playas occur farther north in the Texas Panhandle, as well as in adjacent parts of New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Scoured out by some still mysterious interaction between wind, water, and underlying geology, these clay-lined basins have been in existence for at least 10,000 years, and judging from remains found buried in their beds, once served as watering holes for both Columbian mammoths and the Folsom era humans who hunted them. Throughout their long history, playas have presumably functioned in the same way as they do today, as catch basins for runoff and rain. As a rule, they fill up during spring cloud bursts, reach peak levels in June, and thereafter, through evaporation and slow seepage, gradually disappear. The deeper the depression and the more water it holds, the longer the playa persists through the season. Since most playas are flat-bottomed and less than a yard or meter in depth, they are generally dried out by December at the latest. Only the deepest basins, including the increasingly large number that have been modified to retain water for irrigation, hold moisture year-round and during periods of drought. Yet despite their ephemeral nature, playas sustain an abundance of life, including not only semi-aquatic plants such as barnyard grass, curly dock, and pink smartweed, but also a mix and match selection, differing from pond to pond, of up to 6 species of water boatmen, 5 types of dragonflies, 15 kinds of small marsh flies or midges, 19 kinds of freshwater shrimp, and dozens of other squirming, swimming, and flying invertebrates. This living soup, in turn, sustains populations of larger organisms, including amphibians, up to 14 species of salamanders, frogs, and toads, reptiles, especially yellow mud turtles, and mammals, deer mice, cottontails, badgers, striped skunks, coyotes, and raccoons, among others. There's the water boatman and the back swimmer. Look at those drawings. But playas, above all, provide a haven for birds. During the breeding season, these unassuming wetlands serve as oases of nesting habitat, both for marsh-adapted birds such as ducks and red-winged blackbirds, and for a wide variety of typically terrestrial species, including short-eared owls, western meadowlarks, and ring-necked pheasants. The region also provides migratory stopover sites and wintering habitat for enormous numbers of waterfowl and shorebirds that breed elsewhere on the continent. Roughly 2 million ducks and geese crowd onto the playas each fall, including a gabbling contingent of mallards, northern pintails, American widgeons, and green-winged teal that nest in western Canada and the Dakotas. What's more, playas provide off-season accommodation to flight upon flight of gurgling sandhill cranes, more than 300,000 in all, or 90% of the mid-continent population, which land on the mudflats and in the dwindling ponds to feed on the thick slurry of crustaceans. And this is still to say nothing of the stilt-walking American avocets with their upturned bills, or the Wilson's phalaropes, which spin round and round like tops to stir up food. Little understood and vastly underappreciated, the playas of the southern high plains are a vital ecological resource that helps to sustain waterfowl and shorebird populations over much of the continent. This function is shared by a number of other equally important wetlands in the other parts of the Great Plains, many of them, like the playas, out in the middle of the prairies. The central Kansas wetlands, for example, include a variety of freshwater and saline marshes, notably Cheyenne Bottoms and the Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, both near Great Bend, that lead like stepping stones through what is otherwise a vast plantation of corn, sorghum, and soy.
Located on a major mid-continental migration route, these wetlands annually play host not only to waterfowl by the millions, but also to half of all the shorebirds in North America. Although significant populations of shorebirds breed in Kansas and elsewhere in the Great Plains, a much larger number beat northward to the Arctic coast, only to breed, turn around, and head back south, often to wintering grounds on the other side of the equator. Hence the critical importance of refueling stops along the route. Just north of central Kansas, of the central Kansas wetlands, lies the rainwater basin of south central Nebraska, a rolling landscape dotted with several thousand playa-like catchments. And then it's on to the Platte River with its sandbars and wet meadows, and a little further along, the clear, sparkling, utterly incongruous ponds that spangle the sandhills of the northwestern Nebraska. Filled to the brim by the Ogallala Aquifer, the vast reservoir of fossil water that underlies the south central plains, and set against the silence of the grassy dunes, These wetlands are bursting with life and sound. The high-pitched complaints of long-billed curlews, the peeping of sandpipers, the metallic rattle of marsh wrens at nests in cattails. The final entry on the list of major wetland resources on the Great Plains is the prairie pothole region, an area of some 270,000 square miles, 700,000 square kilometers, about the size of Texas, that helps, that angles northwest from north central Iowa to western Minnesota and the Dakotas, and across the Canadian prairies from Manitoba to western Alberta. This entire swath of country is pocked with millions of mostly small knee to waist deep depressions called potholes or sloughs that are a legacy of the most recent glaciation. As the glaciers decayed, chunks of ice became buried at random under layers of gravel and silt. And when these blocks eventually melted, the ground collapsed, turning ice mounds into small meltwater basins. In keeping with this Ice Age heritage, prairie potholes still depend not so much on rainfall as on snowmelt, trickling over frozen ground to replenish their supply of water. Prairie potholes are proof of the adage that every little drop counts. Insignificant if considered in isolation, they gain significance when seen as elements of a sweeping, if fragmented, aquatic complex. The combined area occupied by potholes in the northern states before settlement began is estimated to have been 20 million acres. 8 million hectares, giving them the same collective presence on the landscape as Lake Superior. And since 80% of the pothole region lies in Canada, this comparison barely hints at the wetlands' original extent, much less at their ecological significance. Although they only amount to 10% of the waterfowl breeding habitat in North America, they typically produce between 50 and 90% of all the ducklings that fledge in any given year. Clearly, prairie potholes are spectacularly productive.
But the resources of the riparian zone do more than provide habitat for an abundance of wild animals and birds. Over the years, they have also proven highly attractive to humans, from the semi-nomadic people of the plains woodland tradition who gardened along creeks in Colorado some 2,000 years ago, to the village-dwelling Mandans and Hidetsas, who as recently as the 1880s were growing corn, beans, and squash in plots along the Missouri River and its tributaries. With the intrusion of industrial society, the demands on the riparian zone have grown ever more intense. As we look to the river valleys for farmland, rangeland, roadways, reservoirs, and riverview subdivisions, when these localized impacts are overlain on the global effects of the fire suppression and climate change, the riparian community can be expected to respond in conflicted and complex ways. Even the most innocent changes can trigger profound effects. For instance, what could look less stressful than a herd of cud-chewing cattle bedded on a riverbank, watching the water slip quietly past? Yet, wherever they are present, a major threat to the health of riparian ecosystems. Unlike the native-born bison, which were well adapted to life on the dry plains, cattle evolved in more temperate environments and are drawn to treed valleys in search of water, shade, and forage. Although moderate grazing by a small number of cattle for a short period of time may not cause noticeable harm, heavy grazing inevitably leaves deep scars. Too many hooves and too little space soon pound the place to death as the animals foul the water, destabilize the banks, and trample or chew the upcoming crops of woody plants. Traditionally written off as sacrifice areas by the cattle industry, riparian areas have only recently been appreciated as a rich resource for wild animals and plants. What is life? It is the flash of a firefly in the night. It is the breath of a buffalo in the wintertime. It is the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. Chief Crowfoot, Blackfoot Warrior, 1890.
So this was the end of what I had planned tonight. Although we're doing pretty good on time, but yeah. I love this last poem. And one thing I've been noticing, and I'll just bring this up in my readings and trying to curate this series, is the breath of the buffalo. It keeps coming up, which is interesting. So I have a few questions or thoughts based off of this interesting juxtaposition of readings. We started out with Winona LaDuke, kind of outlined the drastic changes that have happened on the Great Plains over the last less than 200 years. It's insane. And then we moved into this kind of exploration of these, what I'm calling them micro sanctuaries, or these potholes and wetlands that are still in existence across the wetlands or across the Great Plains and harbor such incredible diversity. And I mentioned in the chat, but I love the way she names the different beings that live there still today, now, at this moment, like the water boatman. And something about naming things and acknowledging their presence that I think is important. So I was glad to hear that from her. And I will stop sharing now and grab some guiding questions that I came up with from this series, and put them in the chat and then read them to you guys and see what you think. I would just love to hear your feedback, your experience, the way things are feeling to you. Chat. Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned in the beginning when we started this reading, these two readings share kind of what I kind of recognize as different layers of information. It's like it's the same place, and they're focusing on different layers of that place, about the health and biodiversity of the Great Plains. And I was just wondering what you all made of that pairing, hearing about kind of the drastic changes and then what is still living there, and how you perceived that pairing. And then another thing that came up for me was thinking about the institutionalized blockades, which are so real and vast, and that are preventing change on the Great Plains and elsewhere in terms of subsidies and other institutional kind of yeah, blocks to change. And I'm just wondering if you could help me think through some of those so that we can better identify them and better think through how to persevere. And then lastly, I was intrigued by, why Winona LaDuke talks about cattle ranching as a really destructive industry. And I think it is. I don't think it has to be. But I was also just wondering what is it about the way we raise cattle? And there's some obvious answers here, but that leads to this kind of destructive impulse compared to what you might think of characteristics that might be embedded in wild bison herds. And just thinking through those differences and clarifying them. So those were the questions that came up for me. I'm open to other questions and thoughts. And I just, want to open it up so I can hear from everyone.
I could share a little bit about a project that I'm working on here. I don't think I introduced myself today. I think I know most of you, but my name's Walker. I live in Baja, California in Kumeyaay territory. And I live on a 2,000 hectare ranch, and they run cattle here. And I'm helping them come up with a holistic management plan. And we have meetings and we have numbers, and we are, trying to figure it all out, how to make it work here. But there's this kind of disconnect with oftentimes in these meetings. Like, I don't think that the people I'm meeting with have ever really, I just wanted to use the breath of the buffalo because you mentioned that, Kelly. In a herd, I mean, I don't work with buffaloes, I work with horses, and I do interact with the cattle here quite a bit. But horses greet each other through their breath, and they exchange breath with each other. And it's a way of identifying if that horse is in your herd or outside, or who knows what they're communicating, but this is the way that they greet each other. And I often think if these people that I'm sitting around with could just go and hang out with the cattle for a minute, or hang out with the horses, and understand that they are sentient beings. I think this is the big disconnect in all of the practices that we use for meat rearing practices. I think there's this huge disconnect. It's like talking to someone who's never really been up close to a herd animal before, trying to make sense of it. Yeah, so for me, I feel like I'm, a lot of this really resonates for me. And on some level, it's so emotional. It's hard for me to even read about it, but it's very real. So.
Thank you, Walker. Thank you, Kelly. I think, the thing that strikes me is the section of reading tonight that talks about the way the Bureau of Reclamation organizes the watersheds. I mean, that's so invisible and unfathomable even today, because if you aren't aware of it, it could just seem like you're looking at, quote, nature, when you're looking at cattle feed or grassland, and it's not. So what I would say one of the big differences is that the buffalo, the bison, and the grasslands and the water table lived in a holistic, interdependent, geo symbiotic accord for long periods of time. And that couldn't possibly be more different than this idea of enclosure and organizing enclosures for farmland, and then organizing the water that goes into those enclosures and out of those enclosures. So there's an inside and an outside, and they're both different but the same, because anything that happens on the inside of the enclosure that involves water will sink back down into the water table and move through those enclosure boundaries. So as we know from some of your amazing maps that you shared last week, that basically the entire range of the Bison is partly a drainage basin that moves into the Mississippi watershed and then out to the Gulf of Mexico. So when you think about a cattle enclosure, you might not think that 4 or 5 days of driving, you'd still be experiencing the effect of the residue of cattle ranching in the watershed. And these kinds of things just didn't exist at all with the ranging bison. So I love that I find it deeply ironic that it's called the Bureau of Reclamation. And the, in preparation for my talk today, I did some learning about how the Bureau of Reclamation partners with the US Army Corps. They have 500,000 people working for them in the United States, either through 500,000 people work between the Bureau of Reclamation and the US Army Corps on the management of those dams that we read about. That's a large bureaucratic institution, which is in no way related to either cattle farming or ranging bison. And I don't know how we're going to deal with that. So that's a big puzzle.
Lauren, I just wanted to mention that tonight I was hoping to include another section of reading that talks about the river systems that traverse the Great Plains, which, as you mentioned, are vast and literally drain 41% of this continent. So, talk about it's all connected, right? So, but I didn't have time tonight, but I'm hoping to include that in a future session and show the map, as well as it can, to kind of indicate how enclosure, for me, in my learning with this process, enclosure is a big deal. Enclosure is at the root of a lot of these issues. And fences, but the good news is that there's people recognizing that and removing fences right now, and there are efforts, by the way, just to not end on a bummer note, there are some efforts to make large areas of the range open again. And that's a big part. Movement is a big part of the difference. Being able to move, it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, without always wishing to bring where I come from into it. I mean, it is just an Anglo-Saxon, terror, this enclosure thing. It's, it's a way of hiding land. It's a way of hiding hierarchy and who owns what. And then, it's European. It's definitely from where I come from in England, obviously. And it's completely anti-life. And, it stops everything roaming like it's meant to. I can't remember what else I was going to say. So ultimately it's just consciousness. I mean, those cattle that have such damaging feet, I mean, you know, I'm not sure where the cattle come from here, but I think nostalgia has to be removed as well. Like the cowboys were, I think I'm right in saying, you know, employed to bring cattle to the, like, these brand new cities that where people needed food and they needed it quick. And so you know, there's all this romance, or previously there was all this romance about it. And you know, this whole ranch thing and wolf killing and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it just needs to die out, because and then you have to come again, you know, talk about spiritual practice, but spiritual practice also comes from the ground up, and it involves perception and looking at reality. And reality is that however many 250 species of flowers in 1 square meter or whatever is going to be way preferable. So I guess it's like practical things also, like diet, changing, I don't know, all the obvious things that we can do, as well as, you know, I don't know, like visit those places and, you know, communicate with them and people who live there that care about them.
Hi everyone, I've introduced myself. Kabilal Hiham. I'm on Miwok lands on home of the Wilton Rancheria here in Sacramento. And I think what kind of struck me was, I was reading this week, there's some recent press about the number of bison that were killed in Yellowstone over the winter. And the reasoning behind why this still exists is to protect the cattle from diseases that the bison may have, which is kind of insane to me, that continuing to decline the population of a species who is, you know, on the brink of surviving, continuing to kill them to save millions and millions of cattle who are introduced to these lands. It just kind of baffling to me that the way that the federal government is working, and you know, every year or so keep continuing to kill bison that come outside of the Yellowstone National Park area too. It's insane. I wasn't able to join last week, but I also kind of went on a really deep dive into Winona LaDuke and the work that she's been doing as well. Like, a remarkable human being, and founding a number of organizations. I was looking at her Wikipedia. It's like Indigenous Women's Network, White Earth Land Recovery Project, Honor the Land, and recently another organization called A King. And looking into the Honor the Earth project, a really remarkable organization that's providing grants and capacity building to a lot of organizations, and really focused around raising public awareness and getting funds out to grassroots native environmental groups. And so in the last, I think this book was written in the late 90s or so, or the Duke's book, but then now kind of currently with the work that she's been doing with Honor the Earth, they've granted over $2 million to over 200 Native organizations, and are working to protect a lot of defending the homelands of the Ojibwe and Anishinaabe lands around extractive projects like wood harvesting from forests, and stopping expansion from potato processor that's clearing forests, and shutting down a sulfide mine that's in the area. And really, you know, connected with this work that's happening with a lot of the water protectors to also transition from fossil fuels and stop the construction in the Enbridge line, line 3. And when I stumbled across LaDuke's recent project, which is Akin, which is the Anishinaabe word for the land which people belong on, and she's imagining this community, and that's already existing up in Minnesota. This is like a community development initiative, and culturally based in Anishinaabe kind of economy focused on food, energy, and value-added projects. And they're really working on this kind of existing outside of capitalism, and working to restore the health and well-being, their economic opportunities for the people in the Great Lakes. And they have a couple of cool projects they're working on thermal solar manufacturing facility near the White Earth Reservation, which apparently in the snowy winters of Minnesota, it's actually much more efficient to get solar energy from the reflection that comes off of the snow. And they've also got a silk screening studio and selling prints as well. So I'll link some of those in the chat to look at. Some really interesting work that the Duke has been working on since this book.
Thanks, Kavi. And yes, I noticed someone had asked during the reading when the book we are reading was written, and it actually is a bit out of date because it was written 1999 or 1998, actually. So I will work to update you on how things. It's crazy how time has gone by since then. So I will make sure to update you on how things are going with the different efforts that she speaks about in that book. And Kavi's helping me to look into the literally hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations that have formed around caring for the Great Plains and the bison, which is part of this story. Whether or not it works, whether or not anything, they exist and they're working hard every day to make a difference. And I'm really determined to include their voices and stories in this series. So as we go forward, I will bring more of that into our discussion and our readings. But yeah, so thanks, Kavi, for connecting all that, and just a couple things that I've learned because I was doing this research about the differences between the way cattle graze and bison graze. It's really a difference of adaptation to place. I learned that bison need much less water, so they don't crowd around aquatic environments like cattle do. And they're much hardier in terms of temperature changes, so they don't crowd around trees, them out, and things like that. So it's interesting to start to sink into adaptation to place and how, yeah, like Lauren was saying earlier, we're forcing some of these things onto the landscape.
I just want to say I heard this week that cattle comes from the same word as chattel, which is like an owned thing also. So that's a whole other different that shows the consciousness in the word itself.
Yeah, private property and ownership, I also think in relation to enclosure, clearly is a key issue. The way we define that, the way we think about that.
I wanted to say hello to everybody. Sorry I joined late. I'm Sue John. I'm from Eagle Rock, which is a neighborhood in Northeast LA. And Kavi, a lot of the things that you mentioned, I was able to hear directly from Winona LaDuke because she spoke in LA just nearby a week before last week. And it just seems like our discussion about the buffalo versus the cattle is completely relates back to the paradigm that of place, and the pernicious effect of the project of settler colonialism, which is to erase the place. It doesn't matter what makes sense for ecological integrity or of appropriateness of indigenous species and the long deep time relationships of place. That is not the concern of settler colonialism. The concern of settler colonialism is basically greed for land and to erase what's there and to reshape what's possible on that land. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And because settler colonialism and the project of the 1800s sort of westward migration of Euro-Americans is never allowed to be fully, properly confronted, you still get in 2022, you get buffalo culls, which would not happen if there was any truth telling in this country, if possible, in the institutions that manage land, because the whole orientation and framework and mission of the institutions that are managing land is to exploit the land. It is not to steward the land in the way it was stewarded for tens of thousands of years. And therefore, we have ecocide. We have just a continent of ecocide, as these writers have so eloquently itemized, really. But what I put in the chat is a really interesting podcast that goes into very much the settler colonial attitude of superiority and the way that they spun European origin cattle as superior. In fact, that it creates a kind of a tough man of Meat and Men is the name of the podcast citations needed. And so it's contrasted with like weak, not as masculine kind of strength that you get from indigenous sources of food. And so the whole project was to get English cattle into this country. And so the mentality associated with Euro erasure of indigenous America is directly the problem of ecology that we see today. It's a really good podcast, by the way.
I just want to say thank you, Ansu. I'm going to listen to that podcast for sure because it resonates with everything. It's interesting because I undertook this series and kind of like Walker said, it has been really emotional for me. It's been really emotional. Like it's been hard to face the depth of both genocide and extermination of this whole species. And then as I go through it, I'm thankful that people are still strong enough in the face of all that to keep fighting, and they are fighting now. And so that's part of what I hope to talk about too. Not that it's, like I say, not that it's a solution to the deeper systemic problems, but we're not alone. I'll just say that we're not alone.
Well, I think that the indigenous cultural imagination is deeply rooted in the soil and in the connections with the whole universe of life in the place. And so their way of seeing the cataclysm wrought on this land is to heal it and to restore that original sense of bounty. I mean, that's at least how it's been told to me. And so that sort of imaginative framework of healing is a powerful paradigm that we can draw on. And it's actually not the paradigm that I see in most of the US institutions, which are sort of trained on to technoscience, which was that famous term that Izzy introduced us to a couple of sessions ago, about further manipulating things under the human sort of lens. And it would be the sort of Western European science and technology lens to correct things as they go. And that's not the same as the imaginative healing of the land that I think Indigenous people have in this country. But there's a bit of overlap.
That little piece that I was reading about taking a life without any kind of reverence was really, I think, part of maybe, Ansu, what you're speaking about, the sort of spirituality connected to those beasts that has just been erased. Yeah.
Or it's still there. I'm not totally erased.
Yeah. Or colonized, or however you want to look at that, I guess. Yeah.
No, I think though that's the crack that gives us the hope for this group, for example, for us to reimagine those possibilities.
Exactly. And I will say, like, it's interesting what I'm finding is that Indigenous people are often leading these campaigns or organizations, but there's so many different types of human beings that care about this. Like, even if it doesn't matter what your genetics are, like, there are, I don't know. I hope that we can all start to create a force that remembers. And but yeah, it's complicated and challenging, but I think there, like, all of us are here, and I don't know. Yeah, how do we put our energy in the right directions?
The thing that someone was saying about place, that with indigeneity, there's, or indigenous, consciousness with the land and like interrelationality and everything. There is no sense of place in Christianity or Western. I think at one time cattle were really sacred because they because they helped people through the Ice Age in Europe or whatever. But then with Christianity, there isn't any. It all happened in the Middle East, which nobody has any connection with, and so place is lost. And then so everything is seen in the past and dead because we don't have that. Not we, people who have adhered to that mindset, which has been the Western colonial mindset, that there isn't connection to place and sacredness of place, and also because it's lesser than human in biblical terms, like animals are lesser than human. And I just think it comes down to that, really. I mean, at one time cows were sacred, before 2,000 years ago or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too. I made those assumptions about Christianity, and I think there's a lot of truth to them. But then I read Laudato Si, which is the Pope's encyclical from 2015 on the environment, in which he goes into great detail about the theology around nature. And I think the way he interprets it, this recent Pope Francis, is that those connections with nature and place are very much there in the theology. There are possibilities in the theology, but as with many rhetorical, conventional phenomena that spread across social groups, they get sort of lost and they get interpreted by local conventions, and that message is lost. But he really tries to recover it and point to particular examples through history where Christianity has in fact given great respect to integrity of life, not just of humans, but of all creatures. But I think that message is largely lost by conservative forces and by historical inertia. So.
Well, I think that's a very kind, sorry.
No, go ahead, Hannah.
I was going to say, I think that's a very generous way of looking at the Bible, because I find it pretty hard to reason those things with the history of what it's done to everything.
Right. I mean, that's what I said. The history of the historical inertia of conservative forces manipulating the messages in the Bible and the potential and the theology of the Bible have largely overtaken many instances that you read about in Laudato Si, if you read it, where the theology has actually like venerated and elevated the respect for life and biology.
I just can't get out of my senses the idea of these millions of ton, each one a ton, animals moving freely across the continent and pounding the water table, and that energy of these potholes being drummed by ton-sized creatures who then drop and roll on the earth. And I mean, I'm thinking about just the manifestation of vibration and energy, and how the removal of that must be psychically traumatic for all of the living systems that the microbiome of these lands that you don't see, because that's a monumental soundscape. The breath, the pounding, the movement on a massive, massive level. And I don't imagine that we can imagine what the pure chi life force of those deep rooted grasses that were dipping into that water table that was being shaped by all of those animals, how that all, I wish I could know that for me remains just like this psychic imaginaire, it's right there, but I can't reach it, but I can imagine it. And it must have been incredible to be a being in the water table, hearing those thundering mastodons.
That was so well said, Lauren. You actually helped me try to imagine that space, unlike any of the readings that I've had. So thank you. Just even trying to imagine. Yeah, there's different understandings.
Did we read that previously those playas, or what do they call no
There's playas and potholes, which are
playas and potholes.
Mhm.
That mastodons were previous to the previous creatures roaming that land. I mean, imagine, it's interesting to think of the evolution of it in those terms too. Just that ice melting and these beasts and that sort of evolving into the buffalo, evolving into the cattle, and evolving into fenced lands. It's such a it's an interesting glimpse into that part of the land and its history. Imagine the evolution of it all.
Absolutely, Walker. You just made me think about, there was one book. I've been looking through all these materials about the bison, you guys. So I'm like in the bison. And there was one book that showed the cave drawings of bison. And it showed, and I promise you all, I will share that with you. The cave drawings, and there is one drawing where the bison has actually consumed a human. So it's the outline of a bison with a human inside. And I don't know what that means, but I'm just going to put it out there as these like primal pulses that exist, and I will make sure to share that with us in our session so that we can all contemplate it as a group. Yeah.
Did anyone catch the news maybe when Trump was on the last year when Trump was president and he went to South Dakota to speak at Sturgis or something, or in front of the
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore, yeah. And do you remember seeing that story of those bikers who went too close to a buffalo and the woman's pants got ripped off because
I do remember that. That was in Yellowstone.
What happened? I didn't hear about this.
Hilarious. I'll see if I can find that.
These people don't have any respect for this creature, and repeatedly, not even did it stop after that famous incident, but it keeps going on. I just saw something today, but they keep getting closer and closer to the bison to try to take photos or to like poke it or something. Like they're just chimps. And the bison like took off her pants, basically like dragged her and literally had her jeans in its mouth, and she was left pantsless but with her life.
It's just, that's so
We have a
good.
sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it reminds me.
Seems like a dream photo op as these sightseers come across a herd of bison. But this woman starts raising concerns.
I didn't do this. I thought someone in our crew was saying that, and then I realized.
Wrong.
By the way, you guys, behind me is the tall grass prairie. So this is an area that is really, really still diverse. And I was like, I need to be in it. I want to be inside the prairie. So I found a low shot so that I could be in it and you guys could see it. Because, Like I said, it's interesting, reading about these things is one thing. I've been trying to incorporate images as well because we're just multi-sensory beings, and to like let the information sink deeper, I'm just trying to find ways to do that. So just wanted to point that out.
Kelly, maybe you could get a little clip of the bison dance that people. Yeah.
I've seen the bison dance on Zoo, and I have a specific clip that I have in mind. So I'll definitely include that. It's, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think from here we'll start hearing more from various indigenous voices. I wanted to include some about the ecology of the space that we were learning about, but yeah, I'm improvising a little bit based off of the energy of the group.
Well, shall we segue into the collective sounding maps that we're doing? I love that the idea of measurement, nautical measurement is a sounding. So speaking of the water table and the measurement of space, shall we use our voices in the silo?
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
Over-
when Walker was talking about meeting each other with breath, that the horses do that and the buffalo do that. In a way, that's how we are. We are meeting each other with breath with this singing. And we have no blockades. We're each in our own little cubicles, but we can enter into this silo space together. And I have to say that I came away with a big sense of bounty from these readings. Just the lists of the multitude of creatures, the insects and the birds and the pounds of grass consumed. And the thing that you said at the beginning, Kelly, that life that wants to happen. So I'm thinking that's something that we can keep in mind, that sense of life that wants to happen and meeting each other with our breath. And I'll start it again. And Emily, if you will join in soon thereafter. And Alex, if you can join in after Emily so that people with the lower voices it's easier for them to find their way in too. So I will just mute a moment and find a little melodic pattern, and then I will unmute, and then each of you just sing along at home and then unmute when you want to join. But that can happen fairly quickly. So one moment. Oh.
Wow, that felt so good. I get to hold a little baby puppy in my arms. That felt so good. Oh,
The silo hears all.
Puppy.
Oracle speaks.
Puppy.
You have to see this tiny little
Silo
thing.
hears all.
I wish you could feel this. You have to see this tiny little thing. I wish you could feel this.
Oh.
Oh my goodness.
Bye.
Sweet baby.
I
Oh.
pure life.
I can actually feel your connection to that little being from all the way over here in Zoom land. I'm having a somatic embodied cuddle.
And that's not easy. Like, that's amazing. I feel like some of the things I feel like the silo and the singing, thank you, Olan, for that. Like, that touches into something like I'm in Zoom land and you all are in Zoom land, but I don't know. There's something that touches into that, like, really somatically connects. And I'm thankful for this space to explore those kinds of ways of learning that are not information based, but something else, you know?
It's such a direct connection.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, literally, you guys made me cry because I'm like, I was like, Emily was singing with her heart, and then Ola, and then I just can't. I just can't do it.
Well, I think that's what animals use to communicate are their senses. And we as humans are constantly trying to put all of that into words, which is sometimes not even possible.
Totally, totally, totally. And that's what
I
I've been.
was just getting a message from Jaime, was in the silo through that. And he said that it was magical to listen. He said he's sitting on the aqueduct listening to the end. Oh, wait. Who's they? Yeah. Oh. My internet went down, but it's fun to think of a human being in the silo receiving that.
Yeah.
I'm also I just want to say I'm so thankful to Olan and Lauren and everyone for having the silo as part of this series, because like you guys were saying, we can't learn about the bison just with words, I don't think. And so I don't know what the right path is. I'm not the all-knowing person, but it is either there needs to be other dimensions, physical, auditory, resonant. Like Lauren did such a good job of talking about just the sound of the thunder underneath the ground, the aqueducts. I mean, yeah. So anyway, I just thank you for recognizing that and bringing it in.
And also, imagine sound moves much farther on water than it does on air. So the whole Ogallala watershed probably was vibrating in
Who is that?
That was a puppy.
That was squeaky toy. Wasn't that a squeaky toy having it say?
Oh my God. And now a word from our sponsor. Oh
Exactly.
my
Well,
God.
the funny thing is that they don't really make full puppy sounds, nor do they make dog sounds. They make this kind of larval puppy sound. Like
Oh.
when they're trying to growl or bark, it doesn't really come out like that. But this is
Oh.
the wild one. Uh, she doesn't sit still. She's like Critter. This is for sure. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so they're making all these weird sounds that I've never heard before in the middle of the night, and I record them because they're so strange.
Oh, we should run them through the silo.
Oh, yeah. I could let you hear them. Well,
Yeah.
they're kind of making a little bit of noise now, and they're sleeping when they do it. It's not like they're awake. They're like dreaming of growling and dreaming of barking. And
That's even better. That's even better. Because
it's really cute.
the dreaming of state. It seems so,
Right.
yeah. You know, I have to say, recording things that you think are just mundane or everyday, but recording the sound of those things and listening to them later, you'll hear profound things. I've taken classes in field recording, which is just this practice of going out with a microphone and listening basically and recording things. And then you listen back and it's almost, I don't know what it is, but it's almost like because you took the time to record and think about it, it takes on this other dimension, which is maybe its real dimension. You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh shit. Like I hear it. I hear the dreaming of the puppies and
Right, because
the melting of the icicles, for instance, or like, like simple things can be so amazing.
Yeah. Make a sound. Make a sound. Yeah. You know what I should really record are the cattle that are outside of my door day and night. The bulls are battling with each other. And there's a lot of them this year. And they make this incredible guttural, deep, I don't know if you've ever heard bulls like make this deep, bassy, like rumbling the ground kind of sound. The first night I heard it living here, I thought we call it the beast because we didn't really know in the beginning what that sound was. But I'll try and record some of that for next week because it's really, captivating.
That would be a great sort of stand-in for the bison sound going through the silo.
Oh yeah, I'll record something.
Yeah, if you send it to us, we could play with that. If you email me a sound recording,
Okay, I can do that.
that'll be super fun.
Yeah, and they all have their own tone, their own sounds, and there's two herds, and one lives on one side of my house and the other on the other, and they're constantly calling out to each other. So I feel like I'm like in the crosshairs of this sort of like deep, like, I don't know, conversations going on. It's pretty. And we're kind of in a valley, so I don't know if there's an echo. Maybe there is, but it just is incredibly loud. You'll see.
The way you described that was so beautiful about the two coming together and meeting. Absolutely, please record that. I don't know, I think that we need to pay attention more to sound around us to learn something that maybe we overlook with our kind of need for the next thing or the next accomplishment or the next thing. It's like, yeah, so listening to those sounds. Yeah.
You could record it. And tomorrow there's a solar eclipse in Taurus, the sign of the bull.
Oh,
That might be interesting to see the difference in how it sounds when there's not an eclipse, or if they have anything different to sound, if they sound different, like if they're
oh,
talking about different stuff, the cows, than what they would
oh,
normally
right.
be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I'll do that.
Yeah. What are they talking about at different moments? There probably is different conversations going on.
Oh,
We
there's
wouldn't
a
pick up on if we didn't pay attention, right?
yeah, there's a lot of and it goes on not just for minutes, but it can go on for like the day of them calling back and forth. And where I live is Anaguaje is the only place we have water on the ranch. And so all the animals come here, of course, especially, I mean, there's some vernal pools like those, the way that you were describing the potholes filling up. We have that on the land. They're more like a vernal pools that dry up. But this, in years of dearth like this year, there's no water in those pools. So all the animals come down to the creek here to drink. So there's a lot of activity going on there, a lot of sounds. The wild herd of horses came down from the mountains for the first time today too, because it's dry enough that there's no water up there for them. They have some interesting sounds and ways of communicating, horses, with each other.
Yeah, I imagine if you were to record like very regularly, you would start to see patterns of communication. It's just interesting how like we don't record regularly or pay attention, so we don't see these patterns of communication, but they're there whether or not we acknowledge them.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
there's
Like
all
there are
kinds.
different times of year and the different like the moon cycles like has been brought up. That's really interesting, you know, like and you know, we want to know and maybe we don't need to know, but at the same time, it's nice to know that those patterns are happening around us.
Yeah, it's interesting when at this time in the spring when all the foals are being born, there's a lot of communicating going on between the lead mare and the stallion and keeping track of the foals and them talking to each other in regards to that. And yeah, there's definitely certainly seasonal sounds that um, they're using to communicate for sure. I think I need to light a candle. It's getting dark.
Oh.
We're off grid, so we don't use a lot of power here.
I'm feeling happy about the way people's hearts are being the way people are speaking from the heart, I guess. It's not easy to do that on Zoom all the time, but this learning and mending space has been particularly good at creating a place for that. And it continues on. It's because of the art and the soul and the heart that is behind it. So different from my university classes, by the way. And so much better and more enriching in many ways.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about that. I have a daughter that's in university now, and I always wonder, especially during the pandemic, about these virtual teachings, how I mean, I've seen some of my students have been on Zoom classes too. And there's always this kind of format that happens with the teacher, and then the students are listening or they're looking on their phones or whatever they're doing.
Oh my God.
But it always felt so not communal in a way. It felt more, sort of tiered down from the teacher to that. Maybe those are just a few times that I engaged in that I witnessed that, but feels a lot different than that.
Oh no, I just want to say that I've had it's very, very challenging because I'm teaching classes, literally, you guys, to black boxes.
Oh God.
No one, and we can't require them to turn on their cameras, and no one will speak except through chat. And I don't know, it's an unfortunate thing because I think that there's a possibility of remote learning and sharing that we're exploring here as a group, by the way, that is really rich and really good. And so I don't know. I just don't know. But yeah, it's been challenging for sure. There's something about just even seeing your faces right now.
I love watching Mish work.
And Mish is working. Alex is still there. Hannah's there. And it's like we're far away. Oh, and there's Doug. Doug just popped up out of nowhere.
I'm here.
And it's like
I just always think it's easier if it's just the silo.
and
I
there's
get to just get a sense
Doug just
for
popped
what's going on.
out of nowhere.
Can you hear me at all?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a challenge. And you can hear me laughing in the background. Oh. Yeah, but it's a challenge.
So awesome.
And you can hear me laughing in the background. Oh.
So awesome. Make a puppy sound.
Yeah, the puppy sound in the silo.
Okay, I'm gonna prompt a puppy sound. Make a puppy sound.
Yeah, the puppy sound in the silo.
Okay, I'm gonna prompt a puppy sound. Make a puppy sound. Oh my God, my dog will definitely start howling. Oh it's a coyote critter. Oh my God, my dog will definitely start howling. It's a coyote critter. Daddy dog. Not even allowed to play with the puppy. Not even allowed to play with the puppy.
Hey Lauren, like let's see if we can see this. I went rogue tonight and just I drew on I cut a t-shirt because I got so I was like, oh, I'm just gonna grab something. That was from one of the pictures that you showed of the herd.
and just
I drew on I cut a t-shirt because I got so I
Beautiful.
was like, oh, I'm just gonna grab something. That was from one of the pictures that you showed see what of the
happens.
herd.
Looks
That's amazing.
beautiful.
A herd. It's a herd. It's a herd.
See what happens.
Looks beautiful.
It's a herd. It's a herd. They moved together. Because there was wolves and there was bears. They would move together in tight herds and move together in patterns across the prairie. And there was bears. They would move together in tight herds and patterns across the prairie.
No movie. Hi, Bucky.
Buckaroo!
It's Bucky Jr.
Hi, Bucky.
Is that Lulu?
Yeah.
Oh.
Lulu too.
Little Bucky Jr.
Is that Lulu?
Yeah.
Lulu too.
Little Bucky Jr.
Goodbye, friends. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Dear
Good
one.
night.
Last puppy show.
Last puppy moment.
Bye, friends.
Bye, beautiful baby.
Dear one.
Thank you.
Last puppy
Last
show.
puppy moment.
Bye, beautiful baby. Thank you.
Night to you guys. It was a
Good
fun
night.
Thanks so much.
Night, Alex.
It's great.
Night, Doug. I'm glad you're here with us.
Yeah.
You're making all the difference. I'm telling you, it's
Done.
elevating.
All right.
It's elevating.
Next week I should have all the tech worked out a little bit better, so I
Making
can
all the difference.
join in on the reading. I was kind of
Done.
scrambling with Jaime today, so.
Elevating.
But anyhow,
It
night. I don't know
sounds
if anybody
beautiful.
can hear me. But...
I can hear you loud and clear, buddy. Sounding good. Thanks for everything.
Oh, sure.
Thanks, Doug.
Next week. Sweet.
Good night.
Good night now,
It
Lauren.
sounds beautiful.
Night,
I can
Lauren.
hear you
Alex.
loud and clear, buddy.
Bison.
Sounding good.
And
Thanks for
Lily.
everything.
Thanks, Doug. Good night.
Oh God. Everything we were saying was being echoed. That was intense for a minute. But it was great. But I'm just glad that we're just us now.
But Jason Clarkson is here, or is he here?
Oh no.
Should we take 5 and reconvene?
Let's do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the dogs for a quick walk around the block.
Okay, I'm gonna take a little and then I'll
yeah. Me too. Good idea.
Why don't we all do it together?
That sounds good. You want to come back in like 15? Is that good? Okay.
Absolutely. Where's the is there gonna be a link somewhere that I can
could send a link.
Okay,
Or
send
we
me a
could
link,
just-
girl.
We could use this one, right?
Yes, but we have an unknown guest here.
Oh yeah. All right. So
Okay, I'll be looking for a link or I'll do this link. Whatever it takes to be with you guys, I'm there.
Okay, see you in 15.
Party in 15.
Party in 15. After party in 15.
After party.